Imagine leading 10,000 cavalry in a midnight suicide mission to assassinate Sultan Mehmed II, the Conqueror, the man who captured Constantinople, who sleeps in a pavilion guarded by 500 elite janissaries at the Prospect, center of a 60,000-strong Ottoman army, knowing you will almost certainly die, but that killing him might save your country from conquest. June 17, 1462. Vlad III, the Impaler of Wallachia, with approximately 10,000 cavalry, launched a desperate three-pronged midnight attack against Mehmed's massive invasion force camped near Târgoviște, reaching within 50 feet of the Sultan's tent before being forced to retreat. Here's what makes this night attack legendary. After 3 weeks of scorched earth warfare where Vlad poisoned every well, burned every village, and displayed 20,000 impaled Ottoman prisoners in a mile-long forest of the impaled, Mehmed's demoralized army reached abandoned Târgoviște. On June 17th, Vlad divided forces, 2 diversionary strikes, 3,000 cavalry each, hitting east and west camp perimeters to create chaos, while his personal assault force, 4,000 cavalry, drove straight toward Mehmed's silk pavilion. The midnight attack achieved complete surprise. Fire spread through canvas tents. Panic erupted. Ottoman formations collapsed in darkness. Vlad's charge crashed through outer defenses, shattered Sipahi cavalry formations, hit Janissary shield walls surrounding the pavilion. He physically cut through silk walls with his sword, reaching within 50 feet of Mehmed before organized Ottoman counterattacks from multiple directions forced retreat. Result: estimated 5,000 Ottoman casualties killed or wounded versus 2,000 Wallachian killed, plus 1,000 captured. Mehmed survived, but invasion paused for days to reorganize. Vlad continued guerrilla warfare through summer until support collapsed, fled to Hungarian exile while brother Radu became Ottoman puppet. The assassination attempt failed tactically, but created enduring legend. A vassal prince came within sword reach of killing history's most powerful sultan. To understand the desperate madness of the night attack at Târgoviște and why Vlad III attempted what seemed like tactical suicide, you need to understand the collision of 2 extraordinary men whose fates had been intertwined since childhood captivity. Mehmed II had been forging an empire since his father's death in 1451. Brilliant, ruthless, culturally sophisticated, he spoke 6 languages, commissioned art and architecture rivaling anything in Europe, studied philosophy and mathematics, commanded armies with strategic genius that terrified his enemies. When he was 21 years old, he accomplished the impossible. Constantinople, the unconquerable city, the jewel of Christendom for 1,000 years, the city that had withstood siege after siege for centuries, fell to his cannons and his will in 1453. The shockwaves of that triumph still echoed across Europe 9 years later in 1462. The Byzantine Empire was gone, erased from the map after over a millennium. The Ottoman tide seemed unstoppable, inevitable. By 1462, Mehmed's gaze had turned north toward the fractured Christian kingdoms of Eastern Europe. Wallachia mattered strategically. It controlled key routes across the Danube. Its plains fed armies. Its fortresses guarded approaches to Hungary. For decades, it had been a vassal state, paying tribute to the Sultan, acknowledging Ottoman overlordship, providing troops when required, a useful buffer, a manageable problem, until Vlad III took power. Vlad had learned cruelty in Ottoman captivity as a child hostage. Born in 1431, son of Vlad II Dracul, Vlad the Dragon, he had spent much of his youth as a hostage in the Ottoman court from 1442 to 1448. His father, desperate to secure his throne and maintain peace with the Ottomans, had sent his sons Vlad and Radu to Sultan Murad II as insurance for his loyalty. Standard practice to keep heirs hostage so fathers stayed obedient. Young Vlad and his brother lived at the Ottoman court for 6 years. They learned Turkish, they studied the Quran, they watched how the Ottomans wielded power, broke rebellions, used terror as statecraft tool. Radu adapted, became comfortable, even friendly with the Ottoman princes. Mehmed, just a boy himself then, had known them both during this period. But Vlad never adapted psychologically. He watched, learned, hated. When Ottoman officials punished him for defiance, he filed it away in memory. When he saw impalement used as execution method for rebels, he remembered every detail. When he finally returned to Wallachia in 1448 at age 17, harder than iron, he brought those brutal lessons with him. The road to power was vicious. Wallachia's throne was never secure. Boyar factions fought for control. Neighboring powers backed rival claimants. Vlad was overthrown, exiled, fought his way back. In 1456, he finally secured the throne permanently, and he made absolutely certain no one would challenge him again. He executed boyars by the dozens, impaling those who opposed him, confiscating their lands, replacing them with men loyal only to him personally. He imposed order through systematic terror. Crime vanished because criminals died on stakes. Corruption ended because corrupt officials were impaled. Foreign merchants who cheated were impaled. Ottoman envoys who came demanding tribute were impaled. Vlad understood power with brutal clarity. Wallachia was small, perhaps 500,000 people, poor, surrounded by enemies. Ottomans to the south, Hungarians to the west, rival claimants everywhere. He could not win through popularity or wealth or diplomatic alliances. So he won through calculated fear. He made himself so terrifying that men obeyed him out of sheer survival instinct, and he made Wallachia so expensive to invade that even the Ottomans hesitated. The tribute was the breaking point. Every year, Wallachia owed the Sultan 10,000 gold ducats and 500 boys for the Janissary Corps slave soldiers. Money Wallachia could barely afford. Children torn from families to become warriors for the empire. Submission that grew heavier each year, that would eventually swallow the principality whole until Wallachia became just another Ottoman province with no independence. In 1459, Vlad stopped paying. He expelled Ottoman merchants, he fortified Danube crossings, he prepared systematically for war. For 2 years, Mehmed had been patient. He had other campaigns to manage, other borders to secure. But in 1461, Vlad went dramatically further. He launched devastating raids across the Danube into Ottoman territory. Not small raids, invasions. His forces stormed across the frozen river in winter, when Ottomans least expected it, and burned their way through Bulgarian territories. They killed Turkish officials. They slaughtered Ottoman soldiers. They raided towns and fortresses, and they impaled the prisoners systematically. Thousands of them. Turkish soldiers, Bulgarian collaborators, Greek merchants, anyone connected to Ottoman power. Vlad's forces erected forests of stakes, left the bodies to rot as warnings visible for miles. The raids were savage, merciless, deliberately designed to provoke, to force Mehmed's hand, and they worked. By early 1462, patience ended. The insult could not stand. A vassal had become an open rebel. Rebellion had to be crushed, publicly. Mehmed began gathering an army unlike any Wallachia had ever seen. Not a punitive raid, a conquest. The army that assembled at Adrianople in spring 1462 was a nightmare made flesh. 60,000 men, perhaps more, Janissaries, elite slave soldiers, boys taken from Christian families, converted to Islam, trained from childhood in warfare and fanaticism, the best infantry in the world. Sipahi cavalry, armored horsemen from Anatolia, skilled with bow and sword, who could break armies with a single charge. Azaps, irregular infantry by thousands for skirmishing. Akinju raiders, wild horsemen famous for brutality. Artillery and engineers to break fortifications. Supply trains stretching for miles carrying food, ammunition, siege equipment. Against this overwhelming force, Vlad could muster perhaps 30,000 men maximum, mostly peasant levies, farmers given spears. In open battle on flat ground in daylight, Vlad's army would be annihilated in an afternoon. So Vlad would not offer open battle. He had a different plan, a terrible plan that would turn Wallachia itself into a weapon. When Mehmed's massive army crossed the Danube in late May 1462, they found nothing. The crossing itself was unopposed. Ottoman engineers built pontoon bridges. The army flowed across like a tide, expecting fierce resistance on the northern bank. Wallachian forces should have been defending the river. But there was nothing. Empty fortifications, abandoned watchtowers, silence. At first it seemed like cowardice, like Vlad was running, like the invasion would be easy. But as Ottoman columns pushed deeper into Wallachia, marching north toward the capital, they began to understand the true horror. Vlad had abandoned the border, pulled back his forces, let the Ottomans enter without fighting. But he had left them a gift. He had turned his own country into a graveyard. Every village the Ottomans reached had been systematically burned, not hastily abandoned, methodically destroyed. Walls pulled down, roofs collapsed, every building reduced to charred timbers and ash, every well poisoned with dead animals or filled with stones, every field scorched, crops burned or trampled flat, nothing left for foraging, every granary emptied or set ablaze. The population had vanished, fled into forests and mountains, conscripted into Vlad's army, or dead. The Ottomans marched through a land of ghosts. No food, no water, no shelter, no guides, only ashes and silence and the smell of old smoke hanging heavy. It was June. Summer heat beat down mercilessly on the columns. Men began to sicken on the poisoned water. Horses went lame on rough, unmaintained roads. The army had supplies brought from Ottoman territory, but they had expected to forage along the way, to requisition food from villages, to live partly off the land. There were no villages. There was no land. Only ruins. The first bodies appeared on the third day. Ottoman scouts sent ahead to find roots and water sources. They were found hanging from trees, throats cut, stripped of equipment. Then sentries started disappearing from night watch. Men posted in pairs. In the morning, only one would be there, pale and shaking, unable to explain what happened to his companion. Then a supply train was ambushed. 50 wagons burned, the drovers killed, the attackers vanished before reinforcements arrived. And then the real attacks began with systematic precision. Vlad's forces struck from the forests like wolves hunting wounded prey. Small groups. 50 men. 100, hitting Ottoman columns at their most vulnerable points. They would appear out of nowhere from tree lines or behind hills, kill quickly and brutally, and vanish before Ottomans could organize response. They targeted scouts and foragers, supply trains and rear guards with surgical precision. They never stood and fought conventionally. They struck and fled, bleeding the invasion with 1,000 cuts. Night after night, the terror grew exponentially. Men on watch would disappear without sound. Sentries would be found with throats cut in the morning, dead at their posts. Tents would catch fire and burn while men scrambled out, only to find archers waiting in the darkness. Ottoman soldiers began to genuinely fear the sunset. The daylight marches were hard enough, heat and hunger and poisoned water, but at least in daylight you could see death approaching. At night, you could only wait for it. And then on the 10th day of the nightmarish march, on a hillside along the road north, they found what Vlad wanted them to see: the Forest of the Impaled. It stretched along both sides of the road for nearly a mile. 20,000 bodies, maybe more. Accounts differ on exact numbers, but all agree on what they saw: a forest of wooden stakes, each 6 to 10 feet tall, each topped with a rotting corpse. Ottoman prisoners captured in Vlad's raids over the previous year systematically impaled and left to die in agony. Turks, Bulgarians, Greeks, Arabs,